Shalom, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this insight and inspiration with friends and family. So you look in the book of Genesis, chapter 27. It's a fairly long chapter, but it's definitely worth the read. And this is the story of the blessings which Isaac ultimately gave to his son Jacob. But initially, he intended to give it to his son Esau, whom he thought is the Bechor, has the status of the firstborn. Later, he found out that indeed that wasn't the case, that he had sold it many, many years prior to that, given up his rights to the firstbornhood, and that Jacob legitimately deserved the blessings. However, Jacob was forced, I should say, because he didn't want to do it, as is evident from the verses. He was forced to take certain actions which would really the antithesis of who he was, actions which perhaps are actions of deceit, untruthfulness. But this is because his mom pushed him to do so. She knew better. She understood. She had the depth. She had the appreciation of what really, and who really should be receiving those blessings. She was privy to a deeper dimension that even Isaac wasn't, and thus she pushed him to do what he did. But here's the question. The question is, you see, ultimately, it's obvious that God wanted Jacob to be the recipient of the blessings. And indeed, God himself allowed Isaac later the knowledge, later meaning after the fact, he allowed him the knowledge. He made him privy to the facts, where even Isaac himself said, oh, if that's the case, then rightfully Jacob should receive the blessings. So why did God make it so that Jacob has to go through all these shenanigans and all this controversy just to receive the blessing? Why did God do so? Why is it that Jacob had to be subjected to this, if anyway he was going to receive the blessings and they're rightfully his? Well, there is a statement in the Talmud which gives us tremendous insight, even though it's a very short statement, but it's really very deep and very vast, because it applies to so much of what we experience in the present and what we know about that happened in the past and history, and perhaps what would still happen until the end of times, until we reach that perfect state of existence when Mashiach comes. The Talmud says, Minei ube abba lishte narga, which is Aramaic for, from the forest itself. God made it so that from the forest itself, you take the wood from which to make a handle for the axe, which will chop down the forest. That's the way God made it. We've mentioned this in the past, right? Remember, the antidote, the vaccine for a disease is from the disease itself. The vaccine, the antidote to a snake venom, comes from the snake venom itself. You see, the ultimate, and this is the game, so to speak, that God made, this is what he intended when he created the world, is that we take the bad, subdue it, and harness it for the good. In this case, if Jacob would just receive the blessings, that would be fine, but it wouldn't be fantastic. It would just mean that, okay, the bad didn't prevail. It was cast aside. Evil was pushed away, and the good prevailed. But the evil will never, ever have a chance to be transformed, or as we call it in Kabbalistic terms, to be elevated to somewhat holiness, to something higher than itself. However, when Jacob was subjected to employing some of the tactics of evil, he now was using their very tools. He was called using the forest to form the handle for the axe, which will chop down the forest. He was able to subdue evil with the tactics of evil itself. Thus, he harnessed their tactics for the purposes of good. Thus, not only did he cast away the the powers of bad and evil, but he was actually able to do it a favor by transforming it into somewhat good, by elevating it. In nowadays, we're experiencing in the world much turmoil. And there are people that you would expect to be educated, to be enlightened, and yet they seem to be siding, they are siding with and supporting evil, clear evil. And you ask yourself, what's the purpose in this? How does this happen? How does God allow this to happen? Well, perhaps he wants us to learn from them. Perhaps there's something positive here if we only look for it. Look at their chutzpah. You know what chutzpah means? Their audacity. Look at their tenacity. Look at their pride that they have in what they do, even though it makes no sense. It's absolutely absurd and wrong. Outright evil to be associated and aligned with evil, but yet they seem to be very proud. And they are always boisterous and full of energy, full of audacity. We got to learn from that. If you stand for something good, which you certainly do, be proud. Be a little loud. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be ashamed of what you are. Use their tactics, but for the purposes of good, for the purposes of advancing Hashem's will in this earth. This is similar, or perhaps exactly the same, of what Jacob had to go through in order to get the blessings. By doing so, you end up getting the ultimate blessings, just like he did.